decrees that have come down to us in history. He said this: we need not think alike to love alike. We need not think alike to love alike. What if we were to concentrate less on how we think alike, but instead focus on how we love alike, how we treat one another? You remember that buddy Jesus of mine? He kind of said the same thing when he said the first commandment was to love God and love your neighbor as yourself. He was all about the love. So here we are, a faith tradition that declares that it embraces people of different theology and worldviews. We have people here in this room who are atheists, we have theists, we have Christians, we have people who are Jewish, we have agnostics, and we have Buddhists. And they're all here, right here in this room. And do you know which one is which? Do you know the beliefs and thoughts of those that are sitting next to you? Or are you assuming that you might know? In most of our congregations, honestly, we don't. We don't really talk about it that much. In fact, I remember in one of the congregations I was teaching a class, and in this class there was this couple that had been together for 40, 50 years. As part of the class, I asked them to write down their spiritual journey, their history, their sort of special events and people in their lives. When they did this as homework and they came to the class, I said, okay, please, find someone you don't know and tell them your spiritual journey. And the wife spoke up, Alice, and she said, can I actually partner up with my husband? I said, well, it's important that other people hear your story. And she said, we never talk about this. They're married for 50 years and they never knew each other's spiritual journey. It was a powerful time for them. I think that we're often afraid, like Deb, or even myself, to voice our theologies because we're afraid we won't be accepted. And we don't want to be kind of thrown out of the club. We're afraid that our opinions might offend someone and then we'll be out. And honestly, I feel it too, right? I'm a new minister and I want y'all to like me. I'm only human. But I worried when I first came here, when I talked about some of my shamanic background and even some of my Christian background, that I wouldn't be accepted. I get it, shamanism's a little bit out there. But I try to be very honest about who I am because this is it, this is me. And I hope that those of you who don't think like me theologically, that you can accept that you judge me not by the way that I think, but by the way that I love. And that is, after all, isn't that our third principle? The acceptance of one another and the encouragement of spiritual growth. If you want to know what our principles are, they're on the back of our announcements. I always thought that it was kind of a paradoxical principle. On the one hand, we accept one another, right? And on the other hand, we want them to change? Okay, that's an interesting thing. And I think it is a both and. For me, acceptance and encouragement are outcomes of being loving. We can encourage someone and yet still accept them for who they are. When we accept one another, it doesn't mean that we're passive, that we don't voice our own opinions or even allow someone to say something hurtful or even to hurt another one. But what we do is accept the whole person, not just one aspect of that person that we don't like. And when we encourage someone, it's not a demand under the threat of excommunication, of saying you're out if you don't do this. It's an invitation instead to see things differently. Now, this all sounds kind of really nice in theory, right? It's not easy to do, to accept or encourage in a loving way, particularly when those beliefs go to the heart of who you are. Well, let me tell you about a time when I had to really wrestle with this. It has to do with my friend Lori. Now, Lori, I have known her now for 30 years or so. She's one of my college buddies. And when this particular thing took place, we were known each other for about 15 years. She grew up as the youngest of a big Catholic family, and she was smart as a whip. She was valedictorian of her class. And her older sister, the oldest of all the children, happened to be also gay, and they were very close. Now, Lori and I kept in touch over the years after college, even though she got married and moved to another state. She then also got divorced and moved back to Washington. We often took vacations together, or we talked on the phone and kept in touch with one another. And while wrestling with her divorce, she became a born-again Christian. That's how she described herself. And she also then became a minister's wife. Now, I knew all of this, but for all the time that I had known Lori, she had been pro-GLBT, an environmentalist, and pretty much progressive in her views. In other words, she thought like me. And one day, while vacationing with her, she invited me to go to her church for a service. Now, I knew it was a Foursquare church. And I don't know if you know about Foursquare, but it is fundamentalist. And it's one that's also known for being somewhat anti-gay. And surely, I thought, I've known her for a long time, surely she didn't agree with that. Maybe she liked it for other reasons, after all, her sister was gay. And I didn't really want to go, but she seemed eager to show me her church. And as the time got nearer, I kind of started fretting about it a little bit. Could I really go to this church? I just didn't know, but I also didn't know if it was really true or how she felt about things. And so I kind of tentatively asked her, I said, so, Lori, how does your church feel about gays and lesbians? Oh, she said, it's pretty obvious that the Bible and God are against it. I was so shocked, I sort of blurted out, but your sister's gay! Like somehow that meant magic. But she calmly looked at me and she said, well, of course I love her, but it's up to God to judge her for her choices, not me. I took deep breaths. Honestly, I was just in shock. She kind of said this in passing as I was sitting there on the couch, and I couldn't believe that she would say such a thing. What she was talking about was something that was against the core of my beliefs. For me, love in all its forms is holy, and to deny someone that goes against what I believe deeply. I remember sitting there on her couch, and it seemed like an eternity, just this battle going on inside of me. Could I love this person who believed this way? I was just sort of horrified at the thought of being friends with someone who thought it that way. And I began to tell her, just breathe, Sean, just breathe. As I started to breathe, I also remembered the 15 years of history that we had together, that she had helped me through some really tough times. I remembered the afternoons that we had together and the history, the adventures, the friendships we shared. I'd been ready to give up on all of that because she didn't think this one way like me. But did she love like me? She was ready to accept me, even though she knew I disagreed with her. I realized that if I was going to accept her as my friend, I had to accept all of her. That the my way or the highway approach was only going to hurt both of us, and that it wasn't the way of love, it wasn't the way that I wanted to be. But I also knew I couldn't compromise who I was either, so I told her how I felt. I said, I don't agree with your church's understanding of being gay or of God, but I know it helped you through your rough divorce, so I'll go with you. And I'll admit, it was kind of an interesting experience, lots of hand sort of thing. Nothing really to write home about, but I could see why she liked it. And on the way home, though, I sort of gently asked her, it's my way of encouraging her, so Lori, I noticed that there was an awful lot of male imagery in the worship service. Lots of references to Lord, Master, King. Where was the female imagery? Have you ever noticed that? She sort of thought about it for a moment, and she said, no, I never noticed that before. This was my invitation for her to see things differently. Now, I love and accept Lori for who she is, but I also don't keep silent. I encourage her to also hear my point of view, my interpretation of scriptures, my understanding of the Bible when it comes up. And last I spoke to her, she called me and asked me questions about interfaith work. It seems that her husband has been called to do that kind of work. If I had listened to what my culture taught me, I would have lost a friend and an opportunity for spiritual growth for both of us. Spiritual growth doesn't come when we surround ourselves with like-minded people. It comes when we are faced with differences and when we talk about them. It comes when we speak up if someone says something disparagingly about another. It comes when we accept people for who they are, not for who we want them to be. And we Unitarian Universalists, sometimes we struggle with wanting to think alike. There are some of us that only want to embrace reason or science. There are those others who want us to hold on tightly to Jesus and God. But Unitarian Universalism is not about thinking alike. It's about loving alike. It's about a new way of being in the world. And we accomplish this radical kind of love by accepting one another as we are and encouraging each other to grow. I think that if we, that is the Unitarian Universalists, want to have an impact on the world, we can start with this third principle, learning to accept one another and encourage each other in spiritual growth. We can learn to respect and appreciate the wisdom, say, of the pagans who help us love the beauty of the natural world. We can embrace the justice work of Christians who are said to love their neighbor as themselves. We can respect and lift up the compassion of Buddhists, the atheists who find gratitude in each moment and for all that we have created by human hands. And we can also encourage each of them to grow. We can keep pointing out all the beautiful windows in the cathedral of the world. We have much to learn from one another. None of us have a monopoly on truth. Not me, not you. But together, I think we make an incredibly beautiful stained glass window. Together, like the parts of the house we heard in our story, we can learn to appreciate the gifts that each of us brings and holding together. I like to think of Unitarian Universalism as we are that house that sometimes argues together about who's best. But when we come together, we can actually be that vessel that holds the human family and help it learn to speak kindly to one another and to accept one another. And do you realize that no other religion in the world does this? No other religion in the world sees the world as we do, as a cathedral of many stained glass windows. No other religion in the world offers the gift of acceptance and encouragement in the way that we do. Rather than offering a single way to truth, we offer a community that helps us seek the truth in love. We say that every week. To seek the truth in love. And this is radical. It's so strange. I hope you see this. And I want you to know how much it's needed. This modern age we live in is not so different from that 16th century. Our culture still persecutes those who think differently. And the world needs another Edict of Torda, another Transylvania, a place where religions are judged not by their theologies, the way that they think, but the way that they love in the world. So I ask you, will you stand with me in this faith? Will you accept me and each other as we move forward into a new way of being? Will you encourage each of us to spiritual growth? Will you love that deeply? Will you give the world the gift of your acceptance? And may your answer be yes. Amen. Please rise and bow your spirit as we sing our closing song. Stand.
Stephen Shaw's going to